everyone, important environmental protocols is one of the most important areas that we have to study under the module People, Development and Environment. So, in this video we will be particularly focusing on two important protocols, Montreal and Kyoto Protocol. From these particular protocols we are getting questions very frequently in net exam. So, we will be focusing on these two protocols which are associated with the environment issues, and we will be also discussing a few questions that were asked from this particular area in the previous years as well. So, firstly we will be looking at Montreal Protocol. So, during the 1970s it was proved that chlorofluorocarbons, so CFCs, actually destroy the ozone, and later in 1980s it was observed that there is a depletion that happening in the ozone layer as well. So, this led to the formation of two international treaties to protect the ozone layer, which was coming under, these treaties were coming under the UNEP, which can be called as the United Nations Environment Program. So, in 1970s it was proved that CFCs actually destroys the ozone layer, and in 1980s it was proved that there is a kind of depletion that is happening in the ozone layer, and this led to the formation of two important international treaties that were particularly focusing on the protection of ozone layer. And one more thing that you have to remember is that these protocols comes under the United Nations Environment Program, and this UNEP was created or it was the creation of UNEP was happened during the Stockholm Conference, and it was formed in December 1972. So, which are the two important international treaties that were formed in order to protect the ozone layer? So, the first one is Vienna Convention, that was happened in 1985. So, when you hear the term Vienna Convention, or if you heard the convention name Vienna Convention, you have to remember that this is associated with the ozone layer depletion or the protection of the ozone layer. So, basically the objective of the Vienna Convention is to preserve human health and to protect the environment from any harmful effects of the depletion of the ozone layer. So, what is the primary focus of Vienna Convention? It was formed in 1985, and it was particularly focusing on preserving the human health and also protecting the environment from any kinds of effects that can be caused by the ozone depletion. And the second important international treaty that was formed in order to protect the ozone layer was Montreal Protocol, and it was formed during the 1987, or it was formed in 1987. And what was the objective of Ozone Protocol? It is to repair the ozone layer through worldwide reduction and ultimately elimination of ozone depleting substances. So, the major focus of Montreal Protocol is obviously the protection of ozone layer, and they were particularly focusing on the reduction and the elimination of ozone depleting substances. So, that was the objective of Montreal Protocol. So, here you have a list which includes the various kinds of ozone depleting substances, which includes CFC, carbon tetrachloride, halon, so on and so forth. So, you can take down those list of ozone depleting substances if you want. So, basically this Montreal Protocol, as I have already mentioned, it is focusing on the protection of ozone layer, and particularly it focuses on the elimination or the reduction of the ozone depleting substances. So, through this mechanism they can ultimately protect the ozone layer from depletion. So, that was the major objective of Montreal Protocol. Another important thing that we have to remember is that about the multilateral fund for the implementation of the Montreal Protocol, which was established in 1991 under the Article 10 of the treaty. So, what was this multilateral fund of this particular Montreal Protocol was focusing on? The fund's objective is to provide financial and technical assistance to developing country parties to the Montreal Protocol. So, basically this particular multilateral fund for the implementation of this particular protocol, which is Montreal Protocol, was focusing on the financial and technical assistance to the developing countries who were parties of this particular protocol. So, giving them financial and technical assistance in order to accomplish the major objectives or the goals of Montreal Protocol. And also one more important thing that you have to understand is the treaty has since been ratified by all member states of the United Nations. So, this particular protocol was ratified by all the member countries that were included in the United Nations. Okay, so these are the most important points that you have to remember when it comes to Montreal Protocol. The first and foremost thing, the year in which it was formed, it was in 1987, and its major focus was to repair the ozone layer from depletion, and particularly focusing on the elimination or the reduction of the ozone depleting substances. So, ultimately that leads to the protection of ozone layer. So, you can also remember few of the ozone depleting substances that is given here, and also focus on the multilateral fund that is associated with Montreal Protocol, and also remember that this is one of the treaties which was ratified by all the member states of the United Nations. Now we are moving to the next protocol that we are going to discuss in this particular video, that is Kyoto Protocol. But before moving into the details of Kyoto Protocol, I would like to give you some information regarding the formation of the Kyoto Protocol as such. So here you have a list of events that actually led to the formation of Kyoto Protocol. So it was the Earth Summit that happened in 1992. So it is known as the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. So UNCED, which is commonly known as the Earth Summit in 1992. So this Earth Summit was the conference in which the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was actually formed, the UNFCCC. So the UNFCCC is one of the main important agreements that were signed in the UNCED or the Earth Summit that happened in 1992, and this particular protocol that we are going to discuss, this Kyoto Protocol, is actually an amendment of the UNFCCC. So UNFCCC has an apex body which is known as the UN Climate Change Conference or this Conference of Parties, COP. It is the apex body of UNFCCC. So this Conference of Parties, which is also known as the COP, they have conferences every year, and they will be discussing all the various issues and the various things that are associated with climate change. So it is in the COP3 or the third COP is what led to the formation of the Kyoto Protocol. COP3 or the Conference of Parties, the third Conference of Parties happened in Kyoto, which is in Japan, and it is that particular Conference of Parties that led to the formation of Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol was adopted in the third COP happened in Kyoto, Japan. So you have to remember the events that actually led to this particular protocol or the formation of this particular protocol. So first and foremost, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, which is commonly known as the Earth Summit of 1992. It led to the formation of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is called or which is known as UNFCCC. And it led to the formation of UN Climate Change Conference or Conference of Parties, which is the apex body of UNFCCC. They have conferences every year, and it is during the third COP this Kyoto Protocol was actually came into existence. So Kyoto Protocol is adopted in the third COP, which was happened in Kyoto, Japan. That's why this particular protocol is known as the Kyoto Protocol. Now we are moving to the Kyoto Protocol, the important aspects that you have to remember from next point of view. So as I have already mentioned, Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto, Japan on 11th December 1997, and that's why this particular protocol got its name, Kyoto Protocol, because this particular protocol was adopted on 11 December 1997, and it happened in Kyoto, Japan, and it is officially came into force in 2005. So it was adopted in 1997 and it came into force in 2005. So please do remember these important years that are associated with Kyoto Protocol as well. So basically this protocol is having two commitment periods. So you have the first commitment period and the second commitment period. Please do remember these periods as well. So the first commitment period started in 2008 and it ended in 2012, and there starts the second commitment period, which happened or which started from 2012 and it extends to 2020. So this particular second commitment period was agreed to in 2012 to extend the agreement to 2020. known as the Doha Amendment. Okay, so that is very important thing that you have to remember, and you have to remember the two important commitment periods that are associated with Kyoto Protocol. The first commitment period started in 2008 and it ended in 2012, and the second commitment period was agreed to in 2012 and it has to or it extended up to 2020. So, another important factor that we have to remember which is associated with Kyoto Protocol is that there is a target for the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol that covers the emission of the 6 main greenhouse gases. So, when we discussed about Montreal Protocol, I said that Montreal Protocol is associated with ozone depletion and also it is associated with the reduction or the elimination of ozone depleting substances. So, when you hear the term Montreal Protocol, that is the first thing you have to remember, the ozone depletion and the ozone depleting substances. When it comes to Kyoto Protocol, what is the major thing that you have to remember? That is greenhouse gases. So, if you can remember these types of or these kinds of keywords, that will be very helpful for you in your exams as well. So, Kyoto Protocol mainly focuses on climate change as it comes as an amendment of UNFCCC. Okay. So, it is focusing primarily on climate change, and what is the major objective? The reduction of greenhouse gases. So, if you reduce the greenhouse gases, ultimately it contributes to the climate change activities that are associated with environment as such, right. So, which are the 6 main greenhouse gases which were focused by Kyoto Protocol in the first commitment period? It includes carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons and sulfur hexafluoride. So, these are the 6 main greenhouse gases which were focused by the Kyoto Protocol in its first commitment period. So, emission of this main 6 greenhouse gases was one of the major objectives of Kyoto Protocol. And another important thing, as I have already mentioned, they have an intention or they have an objective to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, but it requires certain mechanisms. So, in a global level, if you want to reduce the greenhouse gases, you have to have a combined effort that has to be put forth by the member countries of the United Nations or the member countries of the Kyoto Protocol as such. So, they have introduced certain flexibility mechanisms. So, if you follow this member countries, if they can follow these kinds of flexibility mechanisms, they can actually reduce the greenhouse gas emission globally. So, that was the major initiative or that was the major intention of creating certain remedial measures which can be called as the flexibility mechanisms that are associated with Kyoto Protocol. So, they have introduced 3 main flexibility mechanisms which includes international emissions trading, clean development mechanism and joint implementation. So, these are 3 important flexibility mechanisms or remedial measures that were put forth by Kyoto Protocol in order to reduce the emission rate. So, it is not that easy for each country to reduce the emission level in order to get a global level result in the decreasing levels of emission in the greenhouse gases. So, it is a global initiative. So, these countries they have to cooperate to each other and likewise they can reduce the global emission as such. So, in order to reduce that kind of a global emission, these member countries they have followed this kind of flexibility mechanisms will help these member countries in order to reduce the emission as such, and it will result in a global decrease in the greenhouse gas emissions. So, please do remember these 3 important flexibility mechanisms that are associated with Kyoto Protocol as well. So, we have discussed several important features or several important characteristics that you have to remember when it comes to Kyoto Protocol. First and foremost thing is it was adopted in Kyoto, Japan on 11 December 1997, and that is why it got the name Kyoto Protocol. And as I have already said, it was during the 3rd COP that this particular Kyoto Protocol was adopted. And also you have to remember the 2 commitment periods. We have the first commitment period which started in 2008 and it ended in 2012, and the second commitment period was agreed to in 2012 and it extends to 2020. So, you have to remember those dates as well, and also try to memorize these 6 main greenhouse gases that were focused during the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. So, they were particularly focusing on the reduction of the emission of this particular 6 main greenhouse gases. And in order to accomplish that particular objective, in order to reduce the emission rate, they have introduced several flexibility mechanisms that will help the member countries in order to reduce their own emissions, so that will ultimately result in a decrease in the global emission of greenhouse gases, and that includes international emissions trading, clean development mechanism and joint implementations. So now we are moving to a few questions that were asked from this particular area in the previous years. So here you have the first question, and this was asked in 2020 June. The only UN treaty related to environmental issues which has been ratified by all 197 UN member states is, and you have the options: Montreal Protocol, Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol and Basel Convention. So when we have discussed about Montreal Protocol, one of the most important points that we have discussed is that Montreal Protocol is a protocol which was ratified by all the member states of the United Nations. So that is a question here as well. The only UN treaty related to environmental issues which has been ratified by all 197 UN member states is, and you have the options Montreal, Paris, Kyoto and Basel Convention. So now you know the answer, right? So the right answer for this question is Montreal Protocol, that is option 1. Moving to the next question, this was asked in 2020 June. Clean development mechanism was first introduced in which of the following international agreements? And you have the options Montreal Protocol, Kyoto Protocol, Rio Summit and Paris Agreement. So when we have discussed about Kyoto Protocol, we said that during the first commitment period, it focuses primarily on the reduction of 6 major greenhouse gases emissions, and also we have discussed about certain flexibility mechanisms that were adopted by this Kyoto Protocol in order to reduce the global emission rates. So in that we have discussed several, the emission trading was one of them, and clean development mechanism was one of the flexibility mechanisms. Joint implementation was one of the mechanisms that is adopted in Kyoto Protocol. So now you got the answer, right? The question here is clean development mechanism was first introduced in which of the following international agreements? So that is Kyoto Protocol. So under Kyoto Protocol, we have different flexibility mechanisms that were adopted in order to reduce the emission of the greenhouse gases. So in that case, the right answer for this question is option 2, that is Kyoto Protocol. Moving to the next question. From the following list, identify the greenhouse gases adopted in the Kyoto Protocol. This was asked in June 2020, and what's the question here? You have given certain greenhouse gases as the options, and you have to identify the greenhouse gases which were adopted in the Kyoto Protocol. What are the options given here? Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbon, perfluorocarbon and sulfur hexafluoride. So if you have listened to the class, now you got the answer. So all these given 6 greenhouse gases were adopted during the first commitment period of Kyoto Protocol. The first commitment period of Kyoto Protocol particularly focused on the reduction of these 6 main greenhouse gases. So what is the options that are given here? You have several combinations given here, and as I have already mentioned, all those 6 greenhouse gases were adopted in Kyoto Protocol. So what is the answer here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, that is option 4. So the right answer for this question is option 4. Moving to the next question, this was asked in 2019 June. Montreal Protocol aims at. So when it comes to Montreal Protocol, what is the term that you have to remember? Ozone depletion, right? So if that's the case, what is the right answer here? You have the options given as reduction in emissions of greenhouse gases, phasing out ozone depleting substances, prohibiting transboundary movement of hazardous waste, enhancing cooperation among UN member states for peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So as I have already mentioned, when you hear the term Montreal Protocol, you have to associate it with ozone depletion and ozone depleting substances. If that's the case, if you can remember it in that way, now you got the answer. So the right answer for this question is option 2, phasing out ozone depleting substances. So the major focus of Montreal Protocol is the conservation or the protection of the ozone layer, and it was primarily focusing on the reduction of ozone depleting substances, so that it will primarily or it will finally lead to the protection of ozone layer. So, the right answer for this question is option 2, that is phasing out ozone depleting substances. Moving to the next question, this was asked in 2019 December. Under Kyoto Protocol, the first commitment period for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 37 industrialized and European community countries was, and you have the options 1997 to 2005, 2000 to 2012, 2008 to 2012, 2005 to 2015. So, what is the question here? You have to find out the period, the first commitment period in Kyoto Protocol. You have two commitment periods, right? The first commitment period started in 2008 and it ended in 2012, and the second commitment period started in 2012 and it extends up to 2020. If that's the case, the question here particularly mentions the first commitment period. So, that happens, or that started in 2008 and it ended in 2012. So, the right answer for this question is option 3, that is 2008 to 2012. So, in this video we particularly focused on two important protocols that are associated with environment, Montreal and Kyoto Protocol. If you are going through the previous year question papers, you can see that these are two important protocols that they are particularly focusing on, and we were getting a lot of questions from this area as well. So, I hope this video will be really helpful for you in your preparations. So, thank you and happy learning.